Minutes approximately for all of you to speak. Again, a special thank you for Councilmember-elect Daniel Strauss, who cares deeply about urban forestry issues and the environmental health benefits of trees. As you worked on this resolution that we're talking about. So Councilmember-elect Strauss, do you want to make any introductory remarks now or later? It's up to you.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. I've been very excited to get to work on the tree ordinance and work with many people around the table and staff with Councilmember Bagshaw. So I want to thank Councilmember Bagshaw, Councilmember Herbold, and any other council members over the last decade who have worked on this ordinance. I want to thank the Urban Forestry Commission, Deputy Mayor Mosley, and all of our folks at SDCI, Shonda and Mike Podolsky. Thank you for your work on this. I also want to thank our city arborists. I have been in community with a number of the people sitting in this room today with tape measures, measuring tree diameter, breast height, and roots. Through my own experience, I have watched developers choose to both preserve trees and to require that trees be cut before buildings are built. And so I have seen in my own neighborhood the difference the developer can make in our community. And so we know that trees add value to new construction. The amount of value that somebody moving into a new building will have from a tree that has been preserved for 30 or more years. We know that trees add value to our neighborhoods, to our city and an environment. Walking in our neighborhoods, I've felt the heat differential between lots that do have trees and lots that do not have trees, and the benefit that it provides wildlife, people, and our community. I inherently know this and understand this benefit of our urban forests and the difference between having school marms and standalone trees and what that means for our community and wildlife. When 30-year-old trees are cut down, we can't recreate that value in just 1 year or 5 years. We need to be able to preserve this value for our community so that we do have urban forests that are healthy and successful. We did set, and thank you for Yolanda and all the other staff that have worked in the mayor's office that worked on this resolution this last year when we understood that the ordinance could not be passed before budget. We were able to lay out the steps that needed to be accomplished for this ordinance to be successful. And that's why we set the first reporting deadline for January so that we could get moving quickly. And I'm excited to receive the report with the scope, schedule, and budget so that we can get going and see this ordinance across the finish line this year. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's go around the table and introduce ourselves, and then as is tradition, we'll start with our own central staff, and then go ahead and introduce yourselves, please.
Yolanda Ho, Council Central Staff.
Casey Joker, the Permitting and Regulation Manager at the City of Portland.
Mike Podolsky, Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections.
Dan Brown, Director of School of Environmental and Forest Sciences, University of Washington.
Joshua Morris, Urban Conservation Manager at Seattle Audubon.
Shonda Emery, SDCI.
Sandra Pinto de Bader, Urban Forestry Advisor for the Office of Sustainability and Environment, and I also staff the Urban Forestry Commission.
Thank you. Yolanda, please.
Yes, so I'll just provide some framing comments and then get to the presentations of our guests here. So as Councilmember-elect Strauss referenced, Resolution 31902, which was sponsored by Councilmember Bagshaw, was adopted by the Council on September 16th of this year, and it represents a joint commitment by the Council and the Mayor to work on updating tree regulations on private property over the next year. And this approach was informed by previous attempts to update regulations, as well as the City of Portland's regulations, which we will hear more about shortly. And so this work is to be conducted primarily by the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections, the city department that is responsible for administering and enforcing the city's tree regulations on private property. The Office of Sustainability and Environment will provide support. OSC, so staffs the Urban Forestry Commission and is currently working on updating the city's urban forestry management plan, which Sandra will discuss later. Within the resolution, there were specific work plan items that were to be explored by Seattle Department of Construction Inspections and Office of Sustainability and Environment such as adopting a definition of significant trees and requiring replacement for the removal. These all were included based on feedback from the Urban Forestry Commission, so we worked with them on that list. The resolution states that they will provide quarterly reports, and so by the end of next month, we should be seeing a kind of more detailed project scope, schedule, and budget. And we'll get a preview from the departments today, and I expect more detail on what updates to policy, practices, and regulations we might be expecting in the next year. So with that, I will hand it over to the next presenter.
Thank you so much, Yolanda, and thank you very much, Councilmember Peterson, for inviting the Office of Sustainability and Environment to be at the table today. Just wanted to kind of set the table in terms of what we're doing. We have 9 different departments working on urban forestry in the city, and we have a core team with representatives of 7 different departments. We created a core team to be able to provide a rapid response to emerging issues and also to move initiatives forward. The core team is currently working on updating the Urban Forest Management Plan, which sets the framework for the work that we do in terms of urban forestry policies, goals, including, I heard in public comment mention of the 30% canopy cover by 2037. So we've been working on this and to prepare to get more data. In 2016, we did a canopy cover assessment, a tree canopy cover assessment. The goal is 30%, and we learned that we're at 28%. And over the last decade, we've had several assessments done, and unfortunately, they have been different kind of technologies that are really not apples to apples in terms of comparison. So we're very excited that we now have a baseline of a 28% canopy cover. With this canopy cover, we learned a couple of things. One of them was that there tends to be fewer trees in areas where people of color and people with lower incomes tend to live. So on average, those communities' canopy cover is 20%. It's an average. We also learned that 72% of our canopy is actually in residential areas. So it really is something that we need to partner up with the community for stewardship of this resource. Based on what we learned, the core team really made a commitment to do inclusive engagement properly, to reach out and elevate the voices of historically underrepresented communities, people of color, people with low incomes, English as a second language, linguistically isolated households, immigrants and refugees, and Native Americans. And we're also working to create stronger connections to the city's climate intensity objectives, and also creating stronger measures and accountability. So work that we've done to date includes inclusive engagement. We're doing it in 2 phases. So phase 1 is complete. What we did is we partnered with Seattle Public Utilities Community Connections program, and they helped us work with community-based organizations and community liaisons to really do a good job in addressing and engaging communities in culturally appropriate ways and in language, in order to be able to get their input on initial draft plan values. And we did this before we started writing anything about the draft plan. We really wanted to start with a blank slate. And we also held listening sessions with partners, with government agencies, tree advocates, tree service providers, volunteers, and of course the Urban Forestry Commission. And all of this information is readily available at the Trees for Seattle website, and our intention is to be posting everything so that the public is aware of the work that we're doing, and they can have first-hand knowledge of all the input we're receiving. We also hired a consultant to do an initial assessment of all the city's policies and programs in terms of urban forestry, and we took all of these input from inclusive engagement to all of our partners' input, the Urban Forestry Commission, and this assessment, and we put together a very first draft plan. So work currently underway is this year we re-engaged SPU's Community Connections to do report backs, and by that we mean that we put together draft goals, draft strategies and actions, and we wanted the group to help us again in culturally appropriate ways to re-engage community to make sure that we heard them and that what we are putting in paper is actually reflecting their values. We are also currently incorporating departmental feedback into the draft. And next steps is we're planning on inclusive engagement phase 2. to bring a refined draft to the general public for comment in Q2 next year. And then our final update, bring the urban forest management plan to council in late 2020. And with that, I would like to pass it on to my colleagues at SDCI.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. So SDCI is part of the core team. I can say for myself and my colleagues, we view ourselves as environmentalists. We love this city. We want to do right by the city. As part of our role, we will contribute to the update of the forestry plan. But I wanted to just mention a couple of things that we've accomplished in the past couple of years that have helped strengthen tree protections. I know that in our observations, as we've heard in the testimony today, it might not seem like there have been improvements made, but there are some. And I wanted to emphasize too that there are some things that we can do to improve our practices and our interpretations of the existing code that can have meaningful improvement or difference in the way trees are regulated in the city. So over the last 2 years, we've increased our education and information efforts to help neighbors, permit applicants, and arborists know more about the value of trees and the regulations for what can and cannot be removed and the replanting requirements. We've an updated website that is the host to this information, and then we also have information available in our permit center. We call them tip sheets, plain language, sort of explanations of code and best practices. So that's one thing. We've also improved our enforcement. In addition to codes, we have director's rules which can interpret and help us administer and enforce the codes. And we updated one in 2017 that helps clarify how fees are calculated when trees are legally cut down, and that has resulted in increased fines and we believe a greater deterrent for people to act outside of what's allowed by the code. And finally, at SDCI, we've increased the resources that we put toward reviewing applications to remove trees, be they hazardous or as part of a development permit request. And that helps us be better consumers of information from arborists if they're trying to demonstrate to us that a tree is hazardous, and we think that has improved our scrutiny of those types of requests. And these arborists that we've hired on staff are also available to assist our other permit review staff so that they can have some more informed opinions about how they should interpret permit applications. So those are 3 accomplishments that we've made over the last 2 years. We recognize that there's still more to do and we want to do more. And I think in focusing on the resolution that Shonda's going to tell you more about, we can tell you about a couple other things that we think we can accomplish in the near term next year, followed by additional recommendations for some potential code updates.
Thank you. Shonda.
Thank you. I'd like to add that ongoing efforts are currently underway for Executive Order 2017-11 to increase tree protections, including work such as updating a director's rule to clarify protection of exceptional trees, including provisions for replanting when those trees are removed. Another thing that I'd like to emphasize here is that we are currently evaluating technology improvements to better track trees in the city that are allowed to be removed and trees that are required to be planted to allow for better evaluation of those trees on private property. The resolution would have SDCI and OSC make quarterly reports to the successor of the PLUS committee. The first report, as discussed, is due January 31st of next year. Included in that report will be 3 things: the project scope, the schedule, and the budget. The resolution outlines topics to be explored, including retaining and updating the current approach of protections for exceptional trees, simplifying tree planting and replacement requirements, and establishing an option for claims fee in lieu for planting trees. So we were asked to consider strategies that include needed housing and other infill development, and also to consider the needs for low income and low canopy neighborhoods while balancing tree protection goals. The city, the council and the mayor have emphasized, as Sandra said previously, the desire for including culturally and linguistically appropriate engagement plan. This is really important because we would like to include a wide range of interests in this work. We feel that including historically underrepresented communities, homeowners, renters, businesses, including developers and builders, neighborhood groups, environmental organizations, climate and environmental justice organizations in this work is very important as we move forward. We look forward to this first report in January 2020, and right now we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to hear from Professor Daniel Brown at University of Washington. We're going to get his presentation set up here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes.
As a relatively new resident of Seattle and a resident of District 4, I'm pleased to be able to provide a little bit of context. I don't have the deep background on the details of the conversation that you have before you, but I have been asked to provide a bit of context from the scientific literature that addresses many of the things that we've already heard addressed so far in the public comments and in the discussion today about benefits and distribution of tree cover that I'd offer as issues to consider as the discussions about regulations and legislation.
Thank you.
Forward. And I want to first of all acknowledge the deep relationship that the University of Washington has with the City of Seattle. We have an 85-year partnership in the management of the Washington Park Arboretum, which is a professionally managed arboretum, 230 acres inside the City of Seattle with a curated collection of around 46,000 plants, many of which are trees. We partner with the Trees for Seattle program through the University of Washington Botanic Gardens to distribute about 1,000 trees to Seattle residents every year. We have a relatively new program that I'll draw on just a little bit to investigate the connections between nature and health, which is an ongoing area of research, and that is a network that connects researchers at the University of Washington to a variety of practitioners, including in many departments of the city. And I was able to draw a little bit on the Green Cities Research Alliance report, which also was a partnership with a variety of groups, including the university and the city. Just a map of the arboretum, if you haven't been there, lots of trees to enjoy. So the key points I want to make first is to list several of the demonstrated environmental and human benefits of trees in urban areas, and I will draw specifically on scientific literature in which those benefits have been demonstrated scientifically. So I can't be a professor without considering the other side of the information that we have available, which is to recognize that there are costs and potential negative effects that can be mitigated as you think about the urban canopy and management of the urban canopy. As we've already heard, the urban canopy is distributed unevenly. This is a point that I want to point to specifically and can result in disparate social impacts. And then finally, I want to underscore that it's important that we recognize the social and ecological context of the urban canopy as we think about maximizing the benefits and minimizing the disparities and negative outcomes. So environmental benefits of urban trees from the scientific literature. We've heard reference to carbon storage and sequestration, which is certainly an important element of trees in any environment. The 2012 Green Research Alliance report reports that carbon sequestration by trees is about 2% of Seattle emissions. This is not going to be the silver bullet that addresses Seattle's emissions, but it is a piece to consider. Probably more importantly are the more proximate impacts, the air quality effects that trees have on removing pollutants like ozone, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides, and particulate matter, all of which have demonstrated health impacts on people. Trees have the effect of filtering those and processing those pollutants. Stormwater quality and regulation, we've heard reference to the effect that urban green space and trees in particular have on reducing the amount of water that flows over land and into the water bodies, and also in filtering the water and reducing the pollutants that are delivered to our waterways. The general area of research and practice that refers to green infrastructure. A lot of that work is focused on green spaces generally and the filtration that comes with prairies or other kinds of vegetation. There is certainly an impact of trees in capturing the water before it reaches the ground, which is an added benefit above lawns and prairies and so forth. But less research specifically on the value of trees versus green space in the deployment of green infrastructure. I will say though that many cities, and I come from Michigan, and I was aware of efforts in Detroit to deploy green infrastructure as a strategy to reduce costs associated with what's traditionally referred to as gray infrastructure, the maintenance of the stormwater infrastructure. And this is an important benefit. Shading and moderation of temperature extremes is certainly important. We are fortunate in Seattle to not have experienced significant temperature extremes on a regular basis. What this means, though, is that Seattle is the least air-conditioned city in the country, and so we rely on those moderated temperatures. And trees provide for, particularly in the summer, moderation of temperatures, reduced cooling costs, and in our case, much of the cooling that we get. Noise reduction, I live just next to I-5, and I very much appreciate the trees that are around us, providing a buffer from the noise that comes from I-5. And enhancing habitat and biodiversity are certainly demonstrated benefits of trees in the urban fabric, and my colleague here from the Audubon Society will talk more about that. In addition to the environmental benefits, there are a variety of demonstrated social benefits that include enhancements to leisure and recreation opportunities and quality of life. We have many cases of demonstrated impacts of trees on property values, increasing property values, and as I mentioned before, within city expenses, reductions in costs for stormwater management, air pollution removal, heating and cooling. We see health benefits from reduced stress and respiratory illness, both physical and mental health benefits. And I want to unpack the mental health benefits. This is an active area of research in our Nature for Health program. We also have very clearly visual and aesthetic benefits, both improving the scenic quality of neighborhoods and communities, and also privacy provided by trees. Within the Nature and Health program at the University of Washington, there's and generally within the scientific community, an interest in understanding the ways in which nature affects human cognition and mental health. We have evidence that nature exposure can increase attention and memory and impulse inhibition and decrease stress. A lot of that work does not separate out trees, particularly from other kinds of nature. So there's an ongoing program of research looking at what aspects of natural features and our experience with them are relevant to mental health. We do have some studies. There's a study out of California looking at urban elementary schools showing a strong correlation between tree and shrub cover around schools and the school test scores. So there's some correlational evidence looking at the benefits of tree cover in particular, tree and shrub cover in particular, on cognitive benefits, but again, ongoing research as to the mechanisms and on those, how that works. Negative impacts and costs. Many allergy sufferers will recognize the challenges with pollen and identifying. One of the things I've learned is that pollen all year round here, whereas in Michigan we had a respite. The insect and animals that are using trees as habitat can become nuisances within neighborhoods. Visual and aesthetic impacts, lighting-related safety concerns where you have darkness associated with a tree canopy. We might have concerns about safety. The branches and leaves that fall off of trees can provide messiness to the environment. And of course, view obstruction. Views are very important in the city of Seattle, and trees can obstruct views. We have some known environmental hazards. I'm not here to say, as Reagan did, that trees cause pollution, but there are isoprenes and terpenes, volatile organic compounds put off by trees that can interact with pollutants in the atmosphere and enhance pollution, although I think that, again, isn't the biggest concern with air pollution in the city. Sidewalk cracks and safety issues are certainly an issue and require maintenance. And so all of this, there are costs associated with planting and establishment trees. We've heard about the importance of maintaining trees and irrigation, management, repair and infrastructure. So all of these are do require attention. Social disparities in tree cover. There's a wonderful title for a paper called Trees Grow on Money, which shows a consistent, strong, positive correlation between household income and urban tree cover in neighborhoods. That particular study looked at correlations across 7 cities. The strongest correlation was with income. In some cities, there was also a correlation with race, with less tree cover in neighborhoods with more people of color. An interesting paradox in this literature is that efforts to increase urban greening, because trees do increase property values, might be potentially a mechanism by which gentrification of neighborhoods is accelerated. So something that we need to think about those complexities as we go forward. This is from the 2012 report, just showing across management units in the city of Seattle the differences in tree cover. We do see on the left-hand side of this graph the declines in the amount of canopy cover from less dense single-family residential homes towards more dense multifamily and commercial mixed-use neighborhoods. And that's not too surprising given that we have differences in the configurations of the neighborhoods and the built environment. This is simply to point to the contextual factors. When we talk about urban trees, we're often talking about another forest, a canopy across the city, but we're maintaining and thinking about individual trees. So the goal that we're talking about is a canopy cover across the city, but we're maintaining that through decisions about individual trees. And so we need to think about the context within which we're managing the forest canopy, going down to the individual tree level. And this is just illustrating some of those benefits at different scales. And so I just want to highlight that context affects outcomes. The individual tree and forest structure and physiology affects the outcomes. We've heard reference to the importance of big trees, tree density, leaf area, leaf biomass, whether it's an evergreen or deciduous tree. All of these factors might be important in affecting the benefits and costs associated with trees. The character of the built environment, lot sizes, street configuration, structural density, and land use all might be nuances that are relevant to the ways in which we think about managing the urban canopy. The environmental conditions, certainly visibility, I mentioned temperature, precipitation, soils, topographic position. And I would bring in here, I don't have a specific slide or reference to climate change, but as we think about managing a canopy for the next 30 or 50 years, we certainly want to be thinking about the ways in which those conditions will be changing in the next 30 to 50 years, with perhaps drier and hotter summers, with perhaps more extreme rain events. It's hard. We need to look into the literature on what's predicted for Seattle.